custom dimensions and metrics. From time to time, using platforms like Google Analytics, you're going to want to get very specific questions. And sometimes you need very specific information in order to answer those questions. Information that Google Analytics doesn't provide on its own and that you must customize. Fortunately, Google Tag Manager helps make this easy. Let's take a look.
All right, it's a deep dive. Objectives. Customizing Google Analytics, in particular, of course, dimensions and metrics. And we will take a look at the Google Analytics settings variable with a little bit more of a deep dive into that particular variable and how that works. The journey so far, we just finished our next level where we had this great discussion on enhanced e-commerce and the differences between standard and enhanced and how to set that up. Before that, page elements with the element visibility trigger. Now we are on custom dimensions and metrics. Then we'll move on to user ID tracking, table variables, JavaScript variables, and more. Right now though, custom dimensions and metrics. We're going to start with a simple question. Why exactly would you need this? Well, Google Analytics does a really great job on its own about collecting a ton of data. It's got browser size, it has the page views, it's got other more specific things you can set up in the terms of events, right? That you can track specific behaviors. But sometimes events just aren't enough. Sometimes you actually want to have a completely separate dimension, a completely separate even metric. And I'm going to show you exactly how to set this up. We're going to use the GAS variable, or Google Analytics settings variable, and GA really does need this. As we go through, what's an example of a possible dimension? Well, how about affiliate or partner traffic? Many times when you are having your traffic promoted to a certain group or by a certain group, there's an affiliate ID. And it might be something, I'm just going to pop this in here just to make it up, but it might be something like AffID equals 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And so you've got AffID equals 1, 2, 3, 4, and they land on the sales page, and then that sets a cookie with the affiliate tracking system, and you're able to tell who gets paid for what based upon sales. And that's all great within the affiliate tracking system. However, wouldn't it be a great idea if we could also get the value of this AffID, in this case 1, 2, 3, 4, into Google Analytics? Well, we can. And when it's in Google Analytics, when it's being stored in Google Analytics, we can build reports out of it. And that's really the difference between storing this as an event somewhere and actually storing it in a dimension so that we can actually build a report from it. So we're going to talk about exactly how to do that. We're going to go into the back end of Google Analytics, and then we see way down here at the property level where it says custom definitions, you have two choices, dimensions and metrics. Now remember, dimensions are just the things that you sort by in Google Analytics, and in the metrics are just the numbers. That's all it is. The metrics are just the numbers in those tables. So depending which one you want to use, they both are exactly the same. We're going to go to dimension for now. So what I'm going to do is we've got 3 that have been set up here already. So just to kind of give you an example, we've got a login state, I've got a customer avatar type, I've got an affiliate ID that's coming through, and I have these set up as different scopes. So the affiliate ID I have for the entire session, that is the entire visit of Google Analytics. I've got a customer avatar, which might be like the type of customer that we're targeting, that's at a user level, and I've got the login state of if the user's actually logged in or not. That might be like a hit state. Now, how did I do this? I just clicked on New Custom Dimension, and then you type in whatever you want here. And then this is your custom dimension that would show up. Now, again, this is where you choose the scope. And product is really just for anything e-commerce related, for products that you've got. So maybe you want to do a custom metric for maybe profit or net profit. You could do that under product scope. And then I've got, of course, hit scope is each individual hit would be associated with this particular custom dimension. But if there's a hit that does not have that custom dimension, it wouldn't carry across. Session it's associated to all hits within just that session. Even if it's on the very last hit of the session, all the other hits would actually get this. And then user it's associated to the user. So as soon as it's available, it gets associated to the session and then all future sessions. So that's sort of how this works with custom dimensions and in particular scope. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create this, but we're not actually going to do anything with it because I wanted to show you, we're going to skip this because we're using Tag Manager, but I wanted to show you what it looked like. You can see here, there you go, whatever you want, and it's index number 4. This is the most important part, this little index number. Now, I've got my index number 1, 2, and 3. So I've got affiliate ID, I've got customer avatar, login state. These are different dimensions. Again, same steps for metrics. I come in here, I go to metrics. You can see new custom metric. I come in here, I decide what the metric is. The only difference, because it's a number, is you can do formatting so that you have that. But that's really the basics of metrics. So the steps for the most part are the same. So we're going to just focus on custom dimensions for now. So affiliate ID being index number 1, what we're going to do is we're going to go into Google Tag Manager, and I'm going to go into our variables. And we talked about how GA needs gas, and you're going to use this variable over and over and over again. In fact, we already used this, or we tried to use this for our e-commerce tracking. And then the problem we had, if you recall, was when we set this up for e-commerce, because this is a global variable, it affected all the different GA tags, and all the GA tags are reporting all e-commerce all the time, and it was a little too much. So we had to go into the individual tag that we wanted to actually report e-commerce and sort of restrict it by overriding settings. But here, I'm in the global variable itself. I'm in the global variable. Go ahead and minimize this, and then we'll pop into this and this. So really, I've got custom metrics and custom dimensions. Again, these work identically, so I'm just going to do custom dimensions for now. What we're going to do is we're going to add a custom dimension, and you can kind of see the pattern here. It says index and the dimension value. So what's my index? My index is from Google Analytics, whatever it was assigned to. In this case, the affiliate ID is index number 1. So I type in number 1. Then it's what is the value of that? So let's think that through. Is the value affiliate ID? Well, no, this is just a label. This is a label inside Google Analytics. And if I literally typed in affiliate ID and I put that here, then affiliate ID would be hard-coded all the time. It wouldn't really make a lot of sense. What I really want in our little example is I want this value of whatever this is. And do you remember what variable we would use to grab values from parameters in the URL? Hopefully you do. You are thinking the URL variable. That's exactly what we're going to do. So we're going to come through here, and I'm going to quickly set up, because I know that we've already covered this in the basics course, but we're going to go into the URL variable. There we go. And we're going to look for a query, and we're going to say, you know what, we want you to query the AF ID, again, case sensitive. So I'm just making sure it's all lowercase. It's all lowercase here. So query for AF ID, and that is going to be the variable name. We're going to call this URL. In this case, AF ID is what it's actually looking for. So I'm going to name it like that. And now we have our index number 1. Go ahead and place what is in the URL, that if there's a value for AF ID, in this case 1234, that's what we're going to send back. And that's really it. That's really it. Now I'm going to set up these other ones as well. So we have customer avatar and login state. So customer avatar, again, might be something where we have, let's just call this CA. And then maybe we decide this is social media. Social media marketing or something like that, that we're targeting a social media crowd. So CA might stand, in this case for custom avatar. Again, you don't have to do it exactly like this. There is no one way to do anything in Tag Manager and Analytics. This is just an example. So I'm going to set up a index number 2. And since this is our customer avatar, I'm going to do the exact same thing with our URL. And we're going to create a URL variable. In this case, we're going to query for CA, because that's where I'm going to put those details. And this is going to be URL. In this case, CA is what it's looking for, short for customer avatar. So we have that set out in our quick and dirty model here. And then there was another one that we had, which was login state. Now, where would I get login state? So what that might be is I can look in the data layer. And if I look in the data layer, let's go to the page view tag here. I can see here visitor type. I can see logged in state. Right here, so visitor login state. Now, how am I getting this there? It's this plugin. Google Tag Manager for WordPress is a great plugin. It automatically does this for me. You might have to go through and use your developer to get this information, right? So, but I know it's in the data layer, so I'm going to use a data layer variable to actually pull visitor login state out. So in this case, I'm going to do that. And we're going to say number 3. And the value here in this case is not going to be a URL variable, because the variable's in the data layer. So it's going to be a data layer variable, and we're going to put in, again, case sensitive. So I'm going back to my data layer. See, it's lowercase. This is what they call camel case, where it starts lowercase, and then every word is actually got the capital. So that's what we're going to do. So visitor login state, we're going to type it in exactly like that. Visitor login state. Remember, if I made this all lowercase, it would not work. Why? Because Google Tag Manager is case sensitive. Just assume it's case sensitive by default. It'll make everything a lot easier for you. So now we're going to save here. This is a data layer variable. And in this case, it is specifically looking for visitor login state. So I've got that as my label now, and then everything should be set out. So here's my custom dimensions with my affiliate ID. I've got my customer avatar. I've got my visitor login state. Again, I can come down here if I had custom metrics set out and do the exact same thing. And, maybe it was index number 1 and it was, the data layer variable might contain net profit, right? So it really depends upon what your setup is and what you're looking for. So, again, this is just a rough example of what it might look like. Something like this. You might not even need custom metrics. So you don't have to have them. I just want you to be aware that you can and that the setup steps are essentially the same. So now we're going to go ahead and click on Save. Now that I've done that, I am going to click on Refresh. And now we're going to refresh our page. And we have our aff ID and we have our CA here. And I'm going to pull this out and I'm going to pull up our GA debugger extension. So now that I have both of these set out, what should happen is as I'm coming down here, number 1, actually, let's just do this first. We'll start in Tag Manager Preview. And if I go to my page ready, I can go to my page view event here in Tag Manager. I can go to my page view tag in Google Analytics, and I can see here, what did it do? Well, here's all the stuff. Oh, look at this. Dimension number 1, it was 1, 2, 3, 4 was the value. Dimension number 2 was undefined, which means it did not work. Dimension number 3, logged in. Okay, now why was it undefined? Because if you look up here, that little CA disappeared, right? I just hadn't copied the entire thing and refreshed it. But watch what happens here. I'm going to do ampersand, because that's how variables work. We're going to do CA equals, and then I'm just going to say social. We're going to hit enter. Now it should take. We're going to do the exact same thing. So I'm going to go into the page view tag, and we're going to look in the page view tag at the page view event. What got passed through? Look at that. Oh, we can see it all right here. So 1, 2, 3, 4 was the affiliate ID. Social was the customer avatar. And then, of course, we had logged in was the visitor state, pulling from the data layer. So you had all those different details. I can also see those here. So I'm going to pull them through here just to show you different ways to see this. Because remember, in analytics, there really is no real-time option in this particular case to pull in the custom stuff, right? Analytics has this real-time report so that we can see if things are working, but it's built and it's kind of restricted to whatever the default stuff is. All the customization stuff we really can't see in here. I can see the URL parameters, of course, but that doesn't mean I can see that the custom dimensions are being recorded. So what I do is I can tell in Tag Manager, in that GA page view tag, I can see them being passed through. And using GA debugger, I can come down here and I can see already running command set dimension 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, dimension 2, social, dimension 3, logged in. What are those dimensions? They're 1, 2, and 3 based upon the index numbers in Google Analytics. So there's dimension 1, there's dimension 2, there's dimension 3. So the index numbers is how they sort of fit in there. So I can see all of those details coming through too. Now, here's something you might be thinking to yourself. When we did the e-commerce portion of this, when we did the enhanced e-commerce, we had these report over and over again, and they're kind of doing the same thing. So every single time there's a scroll event, I see all these details being passed through as dimensions 1, 2, and 3 again, right in here. And there's another scroll event, and then dimensions 1, 2, and 3 again. But in this case, that's okay. That's okay. I'm fine with that. Like, that's what I want, because I want these custom dimensions associated to the hit or to the session or to the user. I'm okay passing them through with every single Google Analytics tag that comes through. Like, that's okay for what we have as a setup, which is why I'm using the Google Analytics settings variable to do it. Now, the other question might be, well, what if there is no value? What if I don't have an affiliate ID, or if I don't have in this case, the customer avatar signal there? So I'm just going to take this out, and we're going to refresh it. And you can see here, you see this undefined. So dimension 1, undefined. Dimension 2, undefined. Dimension 3, logged in. Why logged in? Because the data layer still has, because it's the data layer variable. I can go to my little variables and I can check here. My data layer variable right here, it says visitor login state, was logged in at this point in time, because that's what the data layer said. Visitor login state was logged in at this point in time. But at this point in time, this is when the, in this case, the analytics page view actually fired the page view tag at the page view event in GTM. So the other things that did not have value were these URLs. It didn't have a value for the affiliate ID, it didn't have a value for CA, which was, again, stood for customer avatar for us. So they were both undefined. So here's how this works. if there is no value and it's undefined and it doesn't have any sort of single quotes around it, it's just plain like this, undefined, just like this. When it looks like this, essentially that's analytics seeing that there is truly nothing there, and it's just going to ignore it. It's not going to try to record anything. It's not going to try to put the word undefined in there. It's not going to say not said. It's just going to ignore it because it knows that it's empty. That's basically empty is how analytics is going to take that. So whenever you see this stuff that says dimension 1, undefined, dimension 2, undefined, I'll pull this over so it's a little easier to read. When you see this, again, without the single quotes around it, if it was single quotes, it would be treated as a word, as a string, and it actually would say undefined in analytics. But in this case, it's just going to be ignored. Analytics is going to be like, okay, cool, there was no dimension, so I'm not going to associate anything for this particular hit, which is why, again, we want to use the Google Analytics settings variable because it's kind of the best of both worlds. Again, we've built upon this, right? So we have our tracking ID. We then set up some cross-domain tracking. Now we've got custom dimensions. And remember, we did try to do the enhanced e-commerce, but that wasn't working because in that particular implementation, it was firing too much. It was firing too often. It wasn't giving us some useful truth. In this case, it does give us a useful truth because if there is a value there, it will associate it with every single hit or session or the user level that I'm doing for scope for the custom dimensions, or metrics that I've set up. So those will all come through perfectly fine. And if there is nothing there, it just shows as undefined, which is ignored by Google Analytics. So it's okay. So whether or not I have the value doesn't really matter, which is great. So I can do it in this one spot and then it sort of ripples through my implementation so that all of my analytics tags that are firing details into Google Analytics and measurement behaviors into Google Analytics have the associated custom dimensions that they need so that I can build my reports effectively. Again, that doesn't mean that you're going to do that. This is just one of the ways to do that, but I wanted to show you how to actually use Google Tag Manager and how easy it was to actually use Google Tag Manager to start sending through custom dimensions and, of course, custom metrics. As we click in here, again, you'll see the exact same pattern. It's just put in the index, put in the value, and then you have your custom metrics as well. Now it's time for you to go forth and customize. Here's what's been covered so far. Of course, customizing Google Analytics, Google Dimensions or Google Analytics Dimensions, Google Analytics Metrics. We talked briefly about hit and scope and the hit scope, the session scope, the user scope. You even have product scope if you're pushing through different dimensions or metrics in for your e-commerce transactions. For example, maybe you sell t-shirts and you would put in the t-shirt size or the t-shirt color. That would be another way that you might want to push through some custom information. So this is something that comes up more often than you might think it does. And of course, we went into the Google Analytics settings variable to set all of that up. And at this point, hopefully you're seeing how you will always come back and revisit that variable because it is incredibly useful to be able to customize that Google Analytics settings variable, your gas variable, to get the right information into Google Analytics at the right time. Here are your resources. Number one, Google's Guide to Custom Dimensions in Google Tag Manager. You will see all the fun details there. Again, fairly quick read. It's just a way to quickly lock it down from what we've covered here so that you have those details. And then our buddy Simo. So go over to Simo. He's got 13 useful custom dimensions that you may want to pass through, including some of the more advanced things like, client ID. That's the Google Analytics cookie value that you can pass through, and countless others. Well, I guess technically 12 others since he's got a total of 13 there. But again, useful custom dimensions. It's great to go through and look at these posts to get ideas. Then take a look at Simo's Guide to Product Scope Dimensions and Metrics. This is exactly what I was talking about just minutes ago, where we were talking about maybe t-shirt size or color, something like that, where you can really enhance the reporting that's available to you and what the types of questions that you're going to be able to answer now because you will have data, because you're going to be able to customize your own analytics implementations. All right. Your next steps. Number one, build a plan. Think this thing through. Take some time to do this. Remember, sometimes when you slow down, you actually get there faster. So when it comes to building your plan around this, think about where can you customize? What's the information that you might want to pull a custom report out in Google Analytics? Or maybe you're even using something like Data Studio to pull details from Google Analytics. But what might you be able to use for a custom dimension or a custom metric, right? And where is that information currently? Is it something you can pass through in the URL, as you saw that we did in our examples? Is it something that maybe is already in your data layer or that you could get to the data layer, right? As a pro tip, it's always better if you can get it into the data layer and read things from that. I think that's by far the most elegant solution. But sometimes it's not always possible based upon your own skill set or what access you have to the system. But remember, in Google Analytics, you have an index number that you have to set up first when you start to do this. So first you have to prep analytics to say, okay, here's the slot that I'm going to create for these details. And then I'm going to use Tag Manager to connect the dots. And Tag Manager needs to know the slot, and then whatever you're going to replace the variable that you're going to use for the value of that slot. And as with all things that involve the data layer, that could involve the data layer. Remember we said the data layer is a great place to put these values and actually just create data layer variables for the values. You're passing through dimensions and metrics or custom dimensions and metrics. You're going to need to work with your developer for this. Have a conversation with them. They may be able to help you out in ways you didn't even realize that they could help you out in. So absolutely bring them in on this conversation as well. And once we have these done, we are ready to move on.
So there you have it. Deep dive, custom dimensions, and metrics. At this point, you should have a solid understanding of how you can use Google Tag Manager to send custom dimensions and metrics into Google Analytics. Once you're ready, let's move on to deep dive.